wer sagt denn die Zeit an gleich? Okay, ist noch eine Minute, ne? Soll ich es jetzt sagen? Okay. You have headphones if you need them, because we will start in German. Welcher Kanal bringt was? Ist eingestellt. Okay. It's preset, the right channel for you. Willkommen im BMZ zu dieser Pressekonferenz im Anschluss an die...
So welcome to the BMZ, to this press conference after the General Assembly of the Sahel Alliance that just ended. I will hold this conference in 3 different languages, so if you need English translation,
globe icon
press
at the bottom left
on the
of
globe
the
icon.
Webex. Si vous avez besoin de traduction française, vous la trouvez
If
sur
you
l'icône
need
de
French
globe en bas à
translation,
gauche. Und jetzt fangen wir an.
press
Ich begrüße die Bundesentwicklungsministerin Svenja Schulze, die soeben
So I'd like to welcome
Sahel-Allianz für
Federal Minister for Development Cooperation, Ms. Schulze, who has just been confirmed as president of the Sahel Alliance. I'd also like to
His Excellency Minister Saleh
welcome His Excellency Minister Saleh of Mauritania,
Die EU-Kommissarin
President of the AU, and Mr. Ousmane Diagana, Vice President of the World Bank Group, and Jutta Urpilainen was not able to come here in person. She joined us virtually. So we'll start with Federal Minister Svenja Schulze. So welcome from my side. The General Assembly of the Sahel Alliance just had its meeting just until now, and I'd like to thank the members for their trust and confidence, and I've just declared my willingness to assume presidency for another year in close collaboration with Vice President of the World Bank, Ousmane Diagana, who will continue to lead the steering committee. So, we, the supporters, have gathered here in large numbers today, which shows very clearly that we care about the people in Sahel, that they're really important to us. We're talking about a region with major problems, from climate change up to terrorist threats, and we're talking about many, many young people. It's the youngest population in the world. Young people looking for a better future. So, if and where and how they find this better solution, better future will have consequences for the region, but also far beyond the region of the Sahel. You all know that those countries that have a military government disagree with us on many, many issues, but it would be wrong to turn our backs to one another. Nothing would get better, many things could get worse, which is why the most important today of this General Assembly is the following. The group of supporters will keep up its activities in the Sahel, will keep up its commitment to the Sahel, and for Germany and the German community, I can say that we will not do business as usual. With the governments that don't have democratic legitimacy, we are working more with local authorities and with non-governmental organizations, which is why we have now, for the first time, representatives of the NGOs with us, and we'll have a meeting with them this afternoon and exchange views with them. Ladies and gentlemen, the Sahel region, unfortunately, has developed into an epicenter of terrorism, and development policy alone will not be able to solve this problem, but it will be able to make a very important and indispensable contribution towards solving it, because we know that most young people don't join terrorist groups out of conviction. They join terrorist groups because they need an income, which means that education, jobs, communities that are able to act, that are functioning, are important tools to counter terrorism. Initiated by Germany and the World Bank, the Sahel Alliance launched an education initiative today, because I think it's part of the shocking reality in many Sahel countries that terrorists attack schools, that they threaten teachers, teaching staff, and they're doing that because they're afraid of education. And education is indeed one of the most effective tools, countermeasures to fight and act against the attempts of terrorist groups to recruit young people, because young people get prospects through education. Right now, 40% of children in the Sahel region are not able to go to school because their schools have been closed, they've been destroyed, because their families have been displaced because of the terrorist threat. And if these children can return to school, if they can learn again, this will give new hopes for families. It also means that the Sahel region will become safer. And our goal is for the next 7 years that more than 2 million boys and girls that are currently out of school will be reached through education offers, for example, in community centers, or through radio, the internet, or with textbooks. We also decided to also look towards the neighboring states, the coastal states, because terrorist groups know no national borders. They work beyond national borders, which is why our cooperation on working on tools to counter terrorism must go across borders. We want to focus on border regions in particular in order to make the population resilient to attempts of terrorist groups to recruit soldiers. Thank you very much, Minister. Mr. Saleh.
Merci. Bon après-midi à chacun. Merci d'être là. Nous venons d'achever cette réunion.
Thank you, Minister Schulze. We have just finished this General Assembly of the Sahel Alliance. We were invited by Minister Schulze from the Federal Republic of Germany. We have seized this opportunity to thank Minister Schulze and congratulate her for her exceptional leadership in order to maintain the issue of the Sahel region right in the core of the international agendas, because the risks are enormous, and there is also the risk of forgetting and sidelining that region. We also can say that has been a step down with regard to bilateral diplomacy, and therefore there is great need to continue to support not only the countries but the people of Sahel. Sahel has never needed this support so strongly than now. Food security has worsened, the pre-existing fragility has increased. We have a very important population increase, the highest in the world, in fact, with a very weak increase in wealth, and all of this is the root cause of what is happening, and it's very difficult to manage the natural resources, water, land, and the rural population are very much dependent on these resources, especially with the climate change as a backdrop. Therefore, the Sahel Alliance remains committed, and in the long run, we are also satisfied with the priorities that were formulated: youth, education, training, employment, increasing resilience, and the territorial integrated approach.
So very much.
Usman Diagana.
A privilege and an honor to lead the Sahel Alliance with Madame Schulze. I think for the last year, we had the opportunity not only to travel together and to engage directly with the authorities of some Sahelian country, but also some Gulf of Guinean country. But constantly, we have been exchanging during visit in Washington or here in Berlin. Sahel face formidable challenges, and the Minister Absalam has just highlighted some of those. And it's exactly because of those challenges that it's very important for us as a development partner to remain engaged. There are three main reasons that I would like really to share. First, we all know that development is not a linear process. It goes with difficulties, and the stories of all nations actually, teach us about the difficulty in working on development. The second reason is the Sahel is a global public good. So whatever is done in Sahel will benefit not only to Sahel and Sahelian population, especially in addressing the challenges, but it will certainly serve peace and prosperity for the world. And the third, this is a country that has opportunities, many opportunities, starting with the youth, actually. Of course, the demographic issues need to be taken into consideration, but at the same time, there are solutions, as we have seen in the world, that can make this development rather than a challenge, but an opportunity and a booster for the development. So for me, among certainly many other factors, those are the three that I would like really to share and explain why it's very important for us to remain in touch with the population of Sahel and put ourselves in a position of development solution provider.
Vielen Dank, Vizepräsident. Jetzt gibt es die Gelegenheit für Fragen.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Now you have an opportunity to ask questions. If you're joining us online, please write your questions in the chat. And the first questions here in the room. Ines Trams in the second row has the first question. ZDF.
Hallo, Ines Trams, deutsches Fernsehen, ZDF. Eine
German television, ZDF. Question to Minister Schulze and Minister Saleh. You briefly explained that three core states are now states or countries that are being ruled by military governments following coup d'etat. What does it mean for your engagement, for your education program that you launched here? How difficult will it be to work without the governments at the local level, at the regional level? And this leads to the question, how much contacts do you need to have with the juntas? And the question to Minister Saleh, what do you expect of the Sahel Alliance of Western donors, how to deal with the governments, with the juntas, with the military governments? Should I start? Well, it is not an easy situation in the Sahel, especially with the many countries where the military has now made a coup d'etat. But we have long-standing experience to work with local players. So we're working through non-governmental organizations, for example, which is something that was also discussed today in our General Assembly, how to intensify collaboration at the regional level and reach the people on the ground. We have a wealth of experience in this field, and that's something that is functioning, that works well, that we want to build on in the future, that we want to continue doing. But we want to remain in dialogue, keep up the dialogue with the coup d'etat states. The doors remain open. That's something we've said very clearly and openly. We want to engage in dialogue, and we want to remain in touch with the countries of the Sahel, also as Sahel Alliance. In the past, this was done through the G5. This alliance no longer exists, which is why we will talk with individual countries of the Sahel. So we're very pleased that Mauritania is with us today as chair of the African Union, and also high-ranking representatives from Chad. So we've had some initial discussions and we'll continue our dialogue, as I said.
Merci. Nous attendons beaucoup de l'Alliance Sahel.
We expect a lot from the Sahel Alliance. We expect the Alliance to continue her programs, especially we expect her contribution as far as food security is concerned, also support for youth education. We encourage the Alliance to continue dialogue with all the countries in the region, and one should also keep a long run vision when one talks about development and international relations.
relations. Sahel, the first partner of the Sahel region is the European Union. Geography won't change with time. And geography tells us that relations between the Sahel and Europe will remain strong. Therefore, we encourage the president of the Sahel Alliance to continue the dialogue with all the Sahel states. The rationale behind this being to support these countries in the long run. We know that the situation at present is difficult, disruptive, but history tells us that we have to strengthen relations between Sahel and the rest of European states. Entschuldigung, ganz kurze Nachfrage, wenn ich darf. Sie sprechen davon,
brief question, follow-up question. You talk about keeping up a dialogue, but the juntas are turning their back on you. They did not send their representatives to today's meeting. How do you deal with that?
Es sind nicht alle Staaten hier heute erschienen, da müssen wir auch gar nicht drum rumreden.
Well, not all states were present today. Well, that's true. And we discussed that today, but it's still possible to have bilateral talks. We went to Burkina Faso, for example, the two of us, and we had talks with the government. And bilateral contacts between countries are not easy. These talks are not easy, but they will continue to take place. We will continue to have these talks. My colleague Annalena Baerbock is just traveling in the region. She's also having discussions with representatives there, and our offer is clear. We want to stay in contact. We want to keep up the dialogue. Tina Handel, third row.
Dankeschön. Tina Handel, ARD Hauptstadtstudio.
Tina Handel, also
viele Menschen in der Region sind auf der
TV
Flucht
station.
vor Terror.
Minister Saleh, many people in the region are displaced. Many end up in Mauritania. What is the current situation in Mauritania? What is your country faced with in terms of challenges? And what would you need in order to cope with the situation? And a question to Minister Schulze. You said you're not doing business as usual with these non-democratic governments. What does it mean in concrete terms? Because you want to make sure that resources and funds only end up in the right hands with the right people. So how can you make this happen? How can you ensure this if you're not active on the ground? So what are you doing to ensure that resources go to the right people?
One of the dimensions of the crisis in Sahel is the refugee crisis and displaced people. Mauritania, the region of Rocharhi, the border region, is hosting a high number of refugees, which represent now 40% of the region's population. That region is rather poor, and therefore the influx of refugees is very problematic concerning, of course, natural resources, food supply, and so on. Food security also as far as education and healthcare are concerned. But let me remind you that Mauritania is one of the few countries in the world that has taken a strong commitment during the refugee summit, during the Forum World Summit in Geneva, to Mauritania has committed itself to treat refugees as its own population. The reason for that is we know that refugee crises normally last between 20 to 30 years. We have learned that. This is one of the lessons we have drawn from our experience. Therefore, we insist refugee children need education, they need healthcare and security. Otherwise, they will be a lost generation, lost to themselves, to their country, and also for us. So this commitment is not only a humanitarian duty on our behalf, but we're also committing to our own values, the African values. I think this is also a good neighboring policy. It is very important, and this will enable us to reinforce our cooperation with neighboring countries in the future. But our country is not a wealthy country, far from it, so we need extra resources. We have been engaging our own resources up till now, but we need support, and I can say that Germany is the first, almost the first partnership of Mauritania in this program aiming at hosting refugees. So we have an issue, residents, refugees. We have discussed this today at the Alliance General Assembly. The World Bank is also one of the most important partners for us. They work and help us for social protection programs and so on. So we wish the Sahel Alliance to support and to finance these resilience programs set up with the UN agencies.
Das leitet auch schon über zu der Frage, wie wir das
brings me to the question of how to ensure this in the region, how we're doing this in the region. Well, unfortunately, we do have experience in development cooperation with fragile states, that in these countries you can't always work with the governments. So we know that by experience. And in Niger, for example, we adjusted our strategy. We're now focusing on the local and regional level, and we're doing the same. We did the same in Mali or Burkina Faso. So wherever we're not sure that the funds we're providing, that we would be providing to a government, actually reaches the population, in these cases we switch to local, regional projects, and we work with UNICEF, for example, or World Food Programme, that have physical structures on the ground. And we had a reception last night, and a successful program was presented last night about adjusting agricultural practices. And we're talking about a region where no agriculture was possible because of the depleted soils, and now cultivation methods have been adopted, and now the soils are becoming fertile again, and people can grow their own food. And such projects show that even when the conditions are very difficult, you can still do something and make a difference for the people in the region. The first question from the first row, Ms. Weiss.
Weiss, Table Briefings. Ich hätte auch zwei Fragen.
Weiss, Table Briefings. I have two questions. One is to Minister Schulze. It was said before that the coastal countries would be a focus of this conference, of this meeting. So how is this going to happen, this focus on the coastal states, and how to combine that with potential measures of the European Union with regard to strengthen the military forces as well? And the second question goes to Minister Saleh. What is your perception regarding the pressure exerted on Mauritania? First of all, regarding terrorist threats, because you have borders with Mali, and also with regard to Russia's presence. Well, I'll start. Well, the coastal states were a topic that we discussed, yes, because we realized that the core of the Sahel has a lot of spillover effects on neighboring states. We went to Burkina Faso, we went to Benin, and people in Benin told us very clearly what happens in emerging regions when there are terrorist activities spilling over from neighboring countries, and coastal states told us the same, which is why we want to work more in the border regions, advance joint projects, because those are regions that are difficult to reach, regions that have difficult conditions, regions where often schools are closed and basic services cannot be provided to the population. So we want to focus more on these border regions. That's one important contribution towards stabilizing the situation there, which is why today at the Sahel Alliance we talked about an enhanced focus on coastal countries and not just focus on the key or core Sahel countries because of the spillover effects that we're seeing. So that was one of the issues that we discussed today in our General Assembly. Thank you.
There are no foreign forces in the Mauritanian territory. Mauritania is pursuing a peace policy. We think that peace is a very valuable good that needs to be protected. Once you've lost it, it is very difficult to reinstate peace. Our president, our government put peace at the center of their attention. Peace in our country, of course, but also peace in Africa and in the neighboring countries. We do what is necessary, dialogue and sacrifice in order to keep that precious good. And we want the country to remain peaceful and stable, and we want to contribute to the triumph of peace on the African continent. Yes, I would like to complement what the minister has said concerning the coastal states. These are the lessons that have been drawn while intervening in Sahel countries in the past. After the crisis broke out, we realized it is important for partners to better coordinate their interventions. We need to be proactive. Coastal countries are neighboring countries of the Sahel countries. Be it Côte d'Ivoire, Benin, or Togo, and so on. It's important to know what the situation is there, especially in Burkina Faso. This is the only country that shares borders with each of the aforementioned countries. Therefore, it's very important for us to start and see what we can do to accompany these countries to help prevent crisis to occur. The World Bank provides financing. PIRE, it is a resilience allocation provided by the World Bank. We have used that money with funds for the Sahel countries. It's not easy for us to translate this in a concrete program because the security situation does not allow us today to carry out these projects as we would like to do. We have a problem of timing, among other things. But today we are using these resources as well for coastal countries to help them set up a resilient system in order to resist the shock.
Westafrika, Christina Peters von DPA in Dakar.
Now testing the line to West Africa, Christina Peters, DPA. Hello, I hope you can all hear me. Well, Mauritania is present. We're also talking about Mali and Burkina Faso. What about Chad? Is it still part of the Sahel Alliance? What about your activities, your efforts in Chad? What about the engagement of the Sahel, of Chad? A question to Minister Schulz and Minister Saleh. We're talking about countering the terrorist threat not just militarily, but also through development policy. But there are a lot of local conflicts that are the root causes. What about negotiating with the jihadist groups, with the rebel groups? So should talks with these groups be part of developing a solution there? Thank you. Well, let's start with a question about Chad. Chad was represented here with senior officials. It was part of the discussion process. The situation in Chad is not easy at the moment. And we, Germany, are still active there with our development cooperation, especially to help the country cope with the large number of displaced people. And since the beginning of the conflict in Sudan, Chad has taken in 500,000 people. And there are more than 1 million people now that are seeking refuge there. So it's one of the big and host countries in the world. And it's a poor country, so the country is faced with severe challenges. And that is why we, the European Union, are providing support for the country to be able to cope with the refugee flows.
Oui, pour ce qui est la Mauritanie, fort heureusement, n'a pas aujourd'hui de terroristes sur son.
Fortunately, Mauritania does not have terrorist groups on its territory. For years, Mauritania has carried out a very firm policy against terrorists and in general against extremist ideologies in general. and we try to work with the youth in order for them to refuse such ideologies, and we give priority to education and training and promote Islam, the true Islam, which is moderate Islam, which for centuries was present on our territory, and where cohabitation and coexistence of religions was possible. So this extremist Muslim Islamist ideology is recent. It's only this century or the previous one, and therefore our youth today is in fact the bulwark that will resist against this extremist ideology. So of course we have to make it impossible for the terrorists to recruit. If they cannot recruit young ones, if they will not have anyone that will carry out so we work on the ideological aspects, on the social aspects, and economic and educational aspects.
Katrin Gensler, KNA in Cotonou, she's raising her hand. Well, thank you very much for your remarks, for explanations. You emphasized that civil society and non-state actors should be strengthened. My question is the following. Maybe you're placing an excessive burden on such organizations because civil society in a country like Burkina Faso is under a lot of pressure. So there have been intimidation attempts, for example. My second question is the following. And we heard warnings that relief organizations could face budget cuts, financial cuts. So what was the signal sent out at this conference? Well, we're trying to strike a balance. It's a tightrope walk. We want to involve civil society representatives and organizations without putting them in danger, of course, which is why we had intensive discussions on this topic today. And everyone present said that everyone who came here said that they could assume this was responsibility, that they would be willing to come to Germany. But of course, we're trying to do everything we can to avoid any risk for civil society organizations, because we want to stabilize them and not do the contrary. When you talk about the budget cuts, well, I as a minister cannot be happy about the budget as it is. If you're a development minister and have enough money, please raise your hand, because it's not a situation that a development minister is in usually, that we have enough money, because we see a lot of suffering, we see the needs, so it's difficult to cope with budget cuts, but we're quite happy that we've been able to increase the budget once again. Our Minister of Finance had other ideas, but now we've ended up with a budget that is higher than his plans. Yes, we will see budget cuts, but the Sahel region is a clear priority for me. Politically and financially, Germany will remain capable to act, will remain strong, and that's also a message that we sent out today at the conference. Nina Köpsel, third row.
Ja, Frau Schulze, Sie hatten gesagt, dass
Minister Schulze,
das Engagement in den Grenzregionen verstärkt werden soll.
You talked about increased efforts, increased activities in the border regions. You also mentioned education as a tool to fight terrorism. What other tools are there to fight terrorism, to counter terrorism? Well, education is, of course, a very important aspect, and we announced the initiative today that we want to launch in order to we launched an initiative to focus more on education, to strengthen education. And we also want to focus more on resilience, and strengthening the resilience of the local population. First of all, locally, on the ground, strengthening community structures, local structures, municipal structures, so that people have access to water, have access to electricity supply, healthcare services, that education is improved. So that's what we need: local ownership, local structures, and that's something that we want to focus on more in the second year now. and then social protection systems and job creation. We're very successful, especially in the area of food security. So we're creating jobs that will enable families and communities to generate an income and then in turn improve their food security. So creating jobs, strengthening local structures, so that's also important for us. Maybe, Osman, you'd like to say something about the education part.
Yes, first and foremost, I should say that in my country, we say that when somebody falls down, it's nice to see where the person fell down, but mainly to see why the person fell down. So the crisis in Sahel is here today because there have been problems that haven't been given the proper response, or problems that have been exacerbated because of lack of governance, be it political governance or economic governance. My colleagues said it before, demographic growth has translated into a very strong pressure on a number of services, especially educational services, in a context where financing hasn't necessarily followed suit. The quality of education has suffered a great deal from lack of financing, and therefore skills have been reduced drastically. Therefore, opportunities for these young people who went to school, these opportunities are not as numerous as there used to be. So we have to start from scratch again and see what are the factors that have created this situation. It's true, education is at the center of everything, basically. Curricula are important, quality of teachers as well, availability of school books and so on, but also we have to think about the relevance of educational systems. Some countries are still trying to build up their nation. You know, in many countries the situation is that dramatic. This is why I would like to congratulate Minister Schulze for her leadership in the field of education. This is why we are now establishing those partnerships. And I can tell you that this was met with a very positive reaction from most of the Sahel states. A lot of them are not present today, true, but we have received written requests by the government of Niger, Burkina Faso, Chad, Mauritania. These people have written to us to say, yes, we are your partners. We want to be part of that initiative with you, and we want to work with all the partners together. And at the end of July, we intend to gather education ministers of these countries in Chad to launch discussions in order to make sure that the new school programs do provide the necessary answer to the needs of states. So we are accompanying those countries. We want to help them for this vital sector.
This takes us to the end of this press conference. I'd like to thank the technicians. I'd like to thank the interpreters. So see you all next time. Thank you.